Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Thank you very much. And whether you're watching with my friends and our producers over at Permanent Time, wherever you watch and listen to your podcast, as always, it's wonderful to have you along for the experience. And let's just keep cheshbon here. This is the second to last podcast we have before Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is Monday night. Usually the podcast comes out on Monday. So I'm not going to put it out while everybody's in shul, because I think that's too much of nisayon for the people in the Rabbi Orlofsky show. Do I go to shul Rosh Hashanah night, or do I watch the podcast? We're going to be doing something special. Anybody who would like to wish the Rabbi Orlofsky show community a Shana Tova, a Tova, a good Gebench Diyar, whatever language we speak, a happy and a healthy new year. Yeah. Shana Tova or Mituka. Feel free to record yourself on whatever device works for you and post it. And we're going to put them all together and make a special pre-Rosh Hashanah presentation for all of our wonderful listeners and anyone who wants to participate. This is your moment to become part of the Rabbi Orlofsky show, right? In front of the camera, not just behind the camera. So record that and follow the instructions where you send it into, and we'd love to have you participate. So this is the penultimate podcast for the year. And I say that knowing that a lot of people don't know what the word penultimate means, but being a professional speaker, I pick up words that nobody knows to make me look smart. And penultimate, because the key to being a speaker is to have a vocabulary that is very big. Anyway, so penultimate means, of course, second to the last. And this is going to be the second to last podcast. Next week will be the last. And then, like I say, we'd like to do something special for those of you who would like to participate in a special pre-Rosh Hashanah thought and sharing. And so we go in. Now, last week, as you will no doubt recall, I had my good friend and mentor, Rebbe Chover, Rebbe Zev Rudman, speak about the Dovid Hashem Ori project, because as we mentioned that during Elul, there's two things that take place. And one is that we say Dovid Hashem Ori, and the other one is that every morning we blow shofar. This is my father, Oliver Shalom's shofar that he used for many years. And I've mentioned this story in the past. I've mentioned probably everything in the past. But during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, my father was deeply moved, and he wanted to do something. Now, what was he going to do? He's not getting on a plane and flying to Israel to work on the kibbutzim, picking tomatoes. He's not going out to fight. So he said, what can I do? And he started davening Shachris every morning at home. He'd put on his talis and tefillin, and he'd daven Shachris. And when Elul came around, he pulled out his trusty shofar, and he blew shofar every morning. Woke up my mother. So it was really something very special. So I would like to talk in honor of Chodesh Elul, and of course Rosh Hashanah, where the shofar is a major part of it, and talk a little bit about that. But first, our sponsor, honored by our good friends Moshe and Dvari David, who are longtime friends of mine personally, and of the show and of the shiurim, participates in everything. In honor of our new grandson and all of our children and grandchildren, may we and Klal Yisroel see much naches. Amen. And that's definitely seconded by myself and by all of our good friends in the Rabbi Orlofsky show community. So that's this is going to be a special idea. Shofar, yeah, and a lot of people don't always understand a lot of the significance of what we're doing with shofar. When a person is blowing shofar in shul, the Baal Tokeya, if you will, my friend Barry Redman, he mentioned this last week, actually. He is about Tokeya. And he says, one of the main kavanas you have is you want to make sure that the tekiah is kosher. that you're doing it right. Yeah, and especially we learned that Chavetz Chaim tends to be very meduyak on everything, and they sit there with a watch to make sure that each one of the tekiyas is at the right amount of time. And if you don't, then they give a klop. And if they didn't like that one, they give it 2 klops, and you have to do the whole set over again. And they're very, very careful. They, for example, will passel it if it goes like this. Well, anybody will passel that one. You know how sometimes it goes up and down? Got to be straight the whole time. They have a lot of different things that they do when it comes to the tekiah. So you have to have that. There's a famous story with the Baal Shem Tov. Somebody told over at my nephew's bar mitzvah, and he was speaking to my mother, and he said there was somebody who was trying out to become the Baal Tekeah for the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was trying out a lot of different people to see. So he listened to their technical skill, and then he asked them, what kavanas do you have? And this one says, I have these kavanas, I have that kavanas, I go with this one, I go with that one, all kinds of different kavanas. This one fellow came in and said, listen, I tell you the truth, I've got 5 daughters that I have to marry off. And I'm very nervous where I'm going to get the money for it. And that's what I think when I do Tekiah Shofar, that it should be something that Kadosh Baruch Hu will take care of my children. I remember Rabbi Geisman was saying this. Rabbi Geisman, oh Shalom, I spoke about him on the show. And he goes, Mrs. Orlofsky, if he only knew that he had you, you'd be able to help him out with his 5 daughters, because how many times you've helped me with poor college. Anyway, when I got up to speak, I said, Mrs. Orlofsky, I have 8 daughters. I have to marry off. But the idea is, of course, that when you have the tekiyas, what is your concentration? What are you thinking of? It has to be your focus. It's a very important idea. So I want to develop a little idea. It could be I've spoken about this in the past, but let me try to develop this a little bit. It's an idea I heard from Rav Moshe Shapiro. Zeichat Tzadik L'Bracha. He should be a Melitz Yoshev for us as Ben Shemaim. And he quoted a pasuk from Tehillim Nun. Mitzion Michlau Yoifi Elokim Hoifia. From Zion, the source of beauty, Elokim Hofia. Hofia is to like shine out. A performance like a hofa'ah. You get to see it. Yeah, and we have that in the Rosh Hashanah davening. Elokeinu Gavosenu Maloch al kol ha'olam kulo b'chvaydecha v'hinasei al kol ha'aretz b'karecha. Right? Rule over the entire world. V'hofa v'hardar gaon uzecha. And shine out al kol yoshvei tevel aretzecha. And all the people live there. Yeah? The idea of a Kadosh Baruch Hu shining out, lahofia. So, from Zion, the Yoifi is Hofia, shines out. So Rav Moshe said a very interesting thing. Hofia and Yofi, right? What is Yofi? What is beauty? So one way to understand something is by understanding its opposite. Yeah? So what's the opposite of Yofi? Mechuar, which is ugly. What is the root of ugly, mechuar? It's related to the word meuchar, which is cloudy. Imagine, if you will, water, when sometimes you pour yourself water and it's cloudy water. You have to wait for it to settle down. When it's cloudy and you can't see through it, that's called meuchar. That's ugly. Yofi, right? Lahofia is it shines forth. Nothing is blocking it. That's what real beauty is. Real beauty is when the beauty on the inside shines out and you can see what it really is. Tzion, the Beis Hamikdash, that makom represents absolute truth. It's the source of everything. It's the Tzion is l'tzayin, the little mark that you make, the points. It's the point of creation. It's where everything shines out, right? It's the beginning of the world. From that point, it all grew and everything. The science, their concept of the Big Bang has this, to some extent, they understand. Yeah, that there was a point of creation and it started out. I may have mentioned this in the past, but I remember Gerald Schroeder said that, people try to say, well, you don't need God, the Big Bang. He says the Big Bang is the biggest kasha on science that ever happened. Because it means they were mechaven to the first three words in the Torah, in the beginning. That's what he says. Because until that time, everybody followed the Aristotelian concept of the universe is infinite and eternal and unchanging. And it always is, was, and will be. So you don't have to ask, like Avram Avinu did, where did the world come from? The world always was. Right? Bertrand Russell, the English mathematician and philosopher, was speaking to the atheist society in England. Not like the one in the Journey song. The atheist convention in LA, right? There actually was an atheist group, society. And he says, when I was young, I asked the question, how do you know there's a God? So they argued first cause. Where did the world come from? The world had to come from someplace. So that first cause obviously had to be God. So I said, then where did God come from? And they said, God always was. And then I realized, if you can say that God always was, I can say that the universe always was. So much for first cause. That's what he writes in an essay. I'm sure it must have elicited a number of guffaws in the atheist society, because in England, they do not chuckle or laugh. They guffaw. Yeah. And it's a word you can't really use in normal society anymore. There are these old expressions that have been lost. This person once said, the biggest shtuck he used to give somebody in England was, good day, sir. He said, well, then I say good day, sir. Yes, but I said good day. I was like, whoa, he said good day. Anyway, so it was interesting. Teddy Roosevelt would call his enemies swine. He'd say, he's a swine. He says, the way he said it, it came out sounding like an expletive, swine. Yeah. So good day, sir. Anyway, they must have had a good laugh over that. And that's what science believed for most of human history. The universe always was, is, and will be. And so you see in the Rishonim that they bring different arguments, etc. But when Einstein discovered that the universe is expanding, he was so upset about this that he actually hid the evidence for it. He put in a fudge factor into the equation so nobody would realize it. Because if the universe is expanding out, that means at some point it started. And the universe had a beginning. Yeah? That original point is called Tzion. That's the point. And that's the Even HaShasiyah, which is in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That is the rock, the building rock, where everything rests upon and then expands out from that point. That is Tzion. And the Yofi comes out from Tzion. What is the beauty? The beauty is clarity. Absolute truth. We live in a world of illusion. I'm sure I've told this story. I know I'm saying this too many times already, but, like I said, I've met a dozen people who recite everything back to me that I've ever said. So I have to be, at least acknowledge the fact that I've said it before. I was speaking at a encounter conference in Cape Town, South Africa. And it was a very difficult group. very difficult group. It's basically a Jewish public school, and they have a rudimentary exposure to Judaism, but because they get money from the government, non-Jews are allowed to also attend. It's so interesting because I had the same thing when I was in Australia, in Sydney, Australia, one of the largest Jewish schools there. There's a percentage, I don't know how large a percentage, of Chinese students. Why? Because since it's a private school, it has a much higher academic level. Yeah. And so Chinese who have only one kid want them to get the best possible education or do anything. And so there's a whole group of Chinese kids. They're exempted from Jewish classes. And I thought it was so interesting because when I was there, I gave my my basic speech that I give to any new group, which is why be Jewish. And there was a Chinese student there. And I said, I thought the Chinese kids are exempted from Jewish studies. He says, I know. He requested to be here. I happen to have a certain following in the non-Jewish world. I know there are non-Jews who watch the podcast, and welcome. Yeah. But it's happened to me more than once. I was speaking at a dinner in like a hall, etc. And I got to speak. And what can I tell you? I'm just so engaging and fascinating that the waiters, who were all non-Jewish, the waiters and waitresses, all stopped what they were doing to listen to my speech. So, who knows? Who knows what's going on? Who knows the impact that are going on? It could be I'm going to meet a number of non-Jews who say over everything they've heard in the Rabbi Orlofsky show, because you never know. There's a famous story about this fellow who goes into a Jewish deli, and the waiter, who was Chinese, comes up to him and says, "No, was willst du?" And he's like, he orders, it says, okay, and schön. He goes off to get the order. So he says to the boss, he goes, "That's unbelievable. You have a waiter that speaks Yiddish." He goes, "Shh, he thinks we're teaching him English." So I don't know how many non-Jews out there are going to be saying over Rabbi Orlofsky isms, So you never know. You never know what's going to end up happening. But so there were non-Jewish kids who were at this Encounter conference in South Africa, etc. Anyway, the first day, most of the rabbis and the faculty managed to alienate the kids in their first class because, everybody else feels like they have to tell the truth. I never feel that way. So everybody got themselves caught on hot button topics. So one person made some kind of, statement. I don't know what it was. I'm sure it was in context, made sense, about homosexual lifestyle. And there were gay kids in the program who became totally alienated. One rabbi was speaking about, Jewish identity and how the Kotel, people feel a connection to the Kotel. Even the Reform movement, which say on their website that the destruction of the temple was a good thing. You can find this in Max I. Demant also in his History of the Jews. They say it was a good thing for the Jewish people because it freed us from the blood cult of the temple. Nonetheless, they want to pray by the Western Wall. So a girl said, "So you think Reform Judaism isn't legitimate?" So he said, "No." He says, "So if my mother had a Reform conversion, you don't think she's Jewish?" To which he said, "No." Anyway, every rabbi was being fought on the ramparts, except for me. I told some very funny stories, and we had a wonderful time, and everybody liked me. Because if you know me, I eschew controversy, right? Butter would not melt in my mouth. I've never said a bad word about anybody or any institution ever. Everybody knows me already. As the milk of human kindness by the quart in every vein. Yeah. Gentleman am I, down to my fingertips, who never could, ever would, let an insulting remark escape his lips. That's from My Fair Lady, in case you're not familiar. But anyway, Henry Higgins was talking about how wonderful he is and everybody else is terrible. Anyway, so So I managed to be fine. Anyway, when we got to the this was a high school. When we got to the dinner, so I sat with the faculty table because the faculty sat apart. And I said, listen, they're clearly understaffed here. And I'm the only one here with, experience working with teens. I ran NCSY Long Island for 9 years. So I have some experience working with teens. And I'm telling you, we're going to have to go out and sit with the kids and get involved. Anyway, the rabbis were all horrified at this idea. I said, I'm not going to go with them. And I said, come on, I'll show you it's easy. Watch me. And I sat down at one table. Okay, it wasn't a particularly hostile table. I saved the hostile table for the last night, but it wasn't a particularly hostile table. And I sat down and I struck up a conversation because I like to believe that I can talk to almost anybody because I find people fascinating. I can always find something to talk to them about. So I figured, okay, it's a group of teenagers. Have you seen any movies recently that you that you enjoyed? And they said, yeah, The Matrix. Now you can figure out how old this story is because The Matrix came out a long time ago. They've since had 4 of them or something. I says, yeah, The Matrix. So I had never heard of The Matrix. I said, what is it? He says, it's this whole movie based on the idea that maybe your dreams are reality and your reality are dreams. And I said, oh my gosh, Masil Shoshan, Perek Gimel. They're like, what? I said, this was written 300 years ago. And I bring out Masil Shoshan and I show him that this world is like night because it's filled with shadows and illusion. And a person could see a pole and think it's a person, and a person and think it's a pole. And a person gets caught up in the illusions of the darkness, etc. Anyway, they were sitting there on their edge of the seat. This was fascinating to them because this is what they had just seen in The Matrix. And it was right there, black and white. And it was anyway, so the people at the faculty table were watching me, and they're like, I come and go, did you just learn Masil Sharm with them? I said, yeah. He goes, how'd you do that? I said, I just talked to them. If you just talk to them, find out what they're interested in. Torah is universal. You could talk to them about anything. But the idea that the Masil Sharm says that these kids found so fascinating was the idea that this world is like night. It is an illusion. We are fooled all the time. I'm sure I've told this story, but it bears repetition. It's an important story. I get an email from a young lady who had learned in the Neve Yerushalayim. And she says, look, I have a friend. The 2 of us went to Neve together. We both became frum. We came back to America. And it's not easy. If you don't have a support group and you're not in a supportive place, it's very hard to stay frum. The Project Inspire convention, which alternates between world famous speakers, and it's just amazing. I mean, everybody is there. It's just one of the most inspiring events to see all these people there. And they intersperse it with people who became frum. And the people who became frum, they said, this person helped me, that person helped me, and I needed to have a support group. And it turns out that in Borough Park, there's a whole community of Project Inspire people who bring in these people who know very little and set them up, get them apartments, set them up with families, get them Shabbos meals, get them education, in the heart of Borough Park, deepest, darkest Borough Park, because you need that support. And if you go back and you don't have the support, it's very hard. Very hard. And people don't always realize this. Just to get on my soapbox for a minute, one of the biggest problems in Kiruv organizations is that they bring people to a certain point and then leave them there. Now, since I'm on my soapbox, I've talked about this in the past, there is a organization that provides funding for Kiruv organizations that have decided to make kiruv professional, and they demand that you rate everybody to see how they're getting from, because if they don't get from according to this organization's schedule, they cut off funding. That to me is called a cult. That is evil, and I know certain organizations said to me, it's very hard, but I will not take money from them. What a terrible thing. And you see that people are working with somebody, and sometimes they don't get from according to your schedule. It might take them a while because people have bechira, unless you're brainwashing them and you're a cult, then you can demand that they go according to your schedule, But, okay. This has done so much damage in the frum world you can't even imagine. But anyway, I was at a meeting once with one of the people who espoused this philosophy, and Reb Mendel Weinbach gave it to him over the head, and Reb Henrik Leibowitz gave him over the head from Chavetz Chaim. It was a terrible, terrible concept. But anyway, you're working with people, and it takes them a while till they decide to do it, And once they make the commitment, this is you can't just send them off on their own and say, well, good luck to you. You have to keep that commitment going. You have to keep that relationship going. It's something that's for life. And it's not something that okay, well, they're done. When I used to run NCSY, we basically worked with high school kids. So to my mind, a story was 4 years, from 9th grade till 12th grade, and then the story was over. And as time went on, I realized that life is not an O. Henry short story. A callback to my podcast on literature. It is not an O. Henry short story. It is a Dickens novel with many, many characters who disappear and reappear 100 pages later. You can't remember who they are. And they constantly keep reappearing and having different stories. And so I tell you that how many times I end up seeing the children, and now I'm in an age, the grandchildren of people that I worked with. And the story goes on, and you never know where it's going to go. I heard this story. I didn't check it out. I'm not Pesach Kron, so I get stark. But the story that I heard is that when I came to learn Chavetz Chaim in 1975, there were a lot of yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael where the building was said on it, the Joe and Faye Tannenbaum building. Yeah. So I was surprised by this, but okay. Years later, somebody told me why. So Joe and Faye came, mostly Joe. And he went into every place and he said, I'll give you $1 million to build a building, but you have to put my name prominently on it. So this was back in the 1970s. People were like, $1 million. They go, yeah, okay. And all these yeshivas were built. The Joe and Faye Tannenbaum campus, building, And so someone asked Joe why he was doing this. And he said, because one day, maybe one of my grandchildren will come to Israel and will see my name on a building and ask them why. John Kaplan from Toronto. And John is a good friend. You're out there. I don't know if this story is true, but I don't care because I heard it and I'm telling it over anyway. So if it's not true, you could write me an email and I may or may not pay attention to it. But anyway, because as we established in the earlier story in Cape Town, I don't care about the truth. I have an agenda. Anyway, so the story is he walks into Or Sameach and he says, hey, how come my grandfather's name is on your building? And they said, we've been waiting for you. like that scene in Back to the Future where suddenly, the time machine disappears and Western Union shows up with a telegram from 70 years ago that was, they've been waiting in the office all these years that they said he'd be waiting at this spot and he couldn't believe it, So he just walks in and says, hey, why is my grandfather's name? He goes, I'm so glad you asked that question. Come on in. Let's have a drink. Now that part, I think I can attest to because when I went to an Or Sameach mentor's mission, so John Kaplan was there. And as we've established in an earlier podcast, I have no idea how to drink. And he explained to me all the different whiskeys, what they were, etc. So he was my Rebbe in whiskeys. So anyway, so very good. So, the idea was that it was there. It was waiting for them all the time, waiting to see when there would be that knock on the door. A person doesn't know a story if it's going to affect your children, your grandchildren, where it comes along. Yeah. I had a girl in my class when I went to high school, and her daughter came to the seminary I was teaching in, and she looked exactly like her mother at that age. But like the spitting image. Talk about freaky. I've had grandchildren who show up. Moms look exactly like their grandparents at that age. Well, not now, because they're all old and wrinkled. No, not me, because I was very clever. I aged prematurely. So people say to me, "Oh, you don't look like you changed at all." Of course not. I looked terrible back then. I look terrible now. But the point is that people get themselves caught up in this illusion. So all of this, I realize now, was to tell you a story that I never told you. So these two girls from the Bay go back to America, and they don't really have support group except each other, you know? So this one girl can't take it anymore. It's very hard for her. And she says to her friend, she says, "Look, I'm going back to my old lifestyle. I'm going to party. I'm going to club. I know it's wrong," she said. "I'm going to do it anyway. To a person who stays in prison for so long that they lose their mind. And they get down on the floor and they play with the rats. And they think the rats are their friends. And that's it. They've lost their mind. Eventually, the jailer realizes there's no point keeping this guy in jail. So he takes it upon himself and he says, listen, this is a waste of time already to keep you in prison. Just clean out the latrines for a week and I'll let you go." And he says, "Why? I'm having a good time with the rats. The rats are my friends. Happy rats." And so he doesn't do it. She says, "That's me. I know the guys I'm going out with are rats. And I know that, this whole thing is make-believe and ridiculous. But I'm happy. I'm happy living a lie." Which, by the way, is one of the themes in The Matrix, apparently, in that movie. Because one of the people, everybody's living this illusion, this make-believe, until you could be woken up, you know. So one of the people who's woken up wants to go back into the Matrix. And he has this line that the person said over to me, which made quite an impression on me. They're in a make-believe restaurant. It only exists in his head. And he says, "I know this steak doesn't exist, but it tastes just as good as if it did." Now, people are happy to have an illusion and to live a world of make-believe rather than to have to face the reality. Yeah. So this her friend writes me and says, "What do I tell?" I said, "Well, I only know one story like you're describing to me. It's from literature. It's from A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, one of the few Dickens books that most people read. They have to read it in high school. And in the story, Dr. Manet, I think if I remember correctly, stays in prison so long, he's in the Bastille, until he loses his mind, and he thinks he's a cobbler. And all day he sits making imaginary shoes on an imaginary workbench. So eventually his daughter Lucy managed to rescue him and bring him over to England. And he gets his mind back. How do you think he felt about all those years that he was sitting and making imaginary shoes? Think he was happy about that? Or do you think he looks back at that and says, "I can't believe that I was so crazy that I wasted my time doing that"? I said, your friend is living in an imaginary world. And she knows it's imaginary. What she doesn't realize is she's going to wake up one day. And she's going to be in her 50s. And what happens then? And I know women in their 50s who are still trying to club and fixing themselves up to interest somebody. And while their friends are enjoying their grandchildren. And at some point you wake up. That's what's called the midlife crisis. At some point you wake up and you say, oh my gosh, what happened to my life? How did this happen? It's sad, but it's a reality. At some point we wake up and we see the truth. Some people make it to their deathbed in the illusion. And they never wake up. And then they get to the Olam HaEmes. And that's Gehenna. We've spoken about this for sure in the past. Everyone brings the marshal of the movie. They show you a movie of your life. Everything you ever did. And your parents are watching, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Chavetz Chaim, Shlomo Zalman, everybody's watching your life. And all the nasty bits, all the parts that you would rather nobody knows about or sees. Everything is in the screen. And it's humiliating. Humiliating. And then it's a double feature. Now they show another film, and it's what your life could have been. What you could have done during that time. Who you could have been. The good that you could have done. The contrast between those two films is what we call Gehenna. When your spiritual self has to come to grips with the decisions that you've made in this world versus the decisions you could have made in this world. Who you could have been instead of who you are. And so we live in a world of illusion. We are in the matrix. And everyone's living in a world of make-believe. It's very sad. That's called mechuar. That's called ugly. Because it's cloudy. Because you don't see the truth. Yofi is when you see the truth. And it's called beauty. And let me tell you something. No, the truth can be beautiful and terrible at the same time. Because when the lights come on and you have to suddenly confront who you are and who you've been, that's rough. There's no question about it. It's rough. Ask yourself, is this the life that I want to live or not? Is this the person that I want to become? We talked about this last week a little bit when we were talking about how to get ready for Rosh Hashanah and figuring out who you are. Who do you want to be? And we all go for illusion. We think it's going to make us happy because our whole life we are chasing the next happiness. And we think this will make us happy. That will make us happy. I'm interrupting for a moment because I told you in the question and answers. So producers started sending me notes from people, which aren't actual questions, but comments. I listened to you many years ago as a bacher in the 90s. I guess now he must be like 120. And I started listening to you again now on your podcast on Torah Any Time, and you are great. That's a comment on Torah Any Time more than me, I think. He says, I listened to you on Torah Any Time, and you are great, meaning to Torah Any Time. A comment I heard from you a long time ago really changed my life, and I wanted to call you for years and tell you, but I never did it, so here goes. You said that you were depressed for a period of time until you realized that being happy or sad is a personal decision that a person makes and has nothing to do with what's going on in their life. Awesome. That's in capitals with an exclamation mark. That really changed my life, and I tried to give that over to my kids and my Talmidim. Thank you. 100% true. You make your life, and people choose to live lives of make-believe. I may have mentioned this also in the past, but there's a book called Illusions. Very small book. Richard Bach, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And it's about this entity, this cosmic entity who comes down to Earth to live as a regular person and forgets that he's a cosmic entity. So his friend, who's a cosmic entity, comes down to remind him who he is. And, he can't get him to give the book is called Illusions, and he can't get himself to get him to give up the illusions. So they're showing, you can get an idea how old this book is. So there was a movie theater in town, and they were showing this movie called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And this fellow who's talking, the narrator, the guy who doesn't know he's a cosmic being, says, "Oh, wow, that's my favorite movie." So he says, "Come in, let's watch it." He says, "I'm watching it, and we're getting to the dramatic ending." And the fellow turns to me and says, "Why are you here?" And he says, "Wait, I want to watch the end of the movie." He says, "But why are you here?" He says, "Quiet, I want to watch the end of the movie. This is the dramatic part where they're going to have the big gunfight. They're talking about going to Mexico." And he says to him again, "Why are you here?" And he says, "Just be quiet." So the movie's finally over, and they go outside. And he says, "Why was that so important to you?" And he says, "It's all make-believe. It's just light flickering on the screen. At the end of the movie, Robert Redford and Paul Newman get killed. But they're not. They're living in Hollywood. They're both fine. It's just all make-believe. But you preferred the illusion over reality." So the guy says, "Okay, but what about people who who live lives of suffering?" He says, "Because there are people who like to go to horror movies. And there are people who like to go to tear-jerkers. And there are people who like to lose themselves in an illusion of misery." A person who's in touch with reality, there is no suffering. Because they know that this is the Olam HaSheker. Olam Haba is called the Olam HaEmes. So by definition, this world is the Olam HaSheker. Why would I let myself get sucked into an illusion? I know it's not real. I have a mashal that I use to describe this, which, I'm repeating myself. I may have used in the past. There's an Abbott and Costello routine. They do it at 2 or 3 different times in different TV shows, movies, I thought Abbott and Costello, some of their humor was absolutely brilliant. Anyway, so Bud says to Lou, he says, "Look, I only got 25 cents. So it's not enough for both of us. So we'll go in there and I'm going to order a turkey sandwich and a cup of coffee and I'll share it with you." He says, "Okay." So they go into the restaurant and the waitress says, "Well, you have." He says, "Well, I'll have a turkey sandwich and a cup of coffee." He says, "What about you?" He says, "I don't want anything." And Bud says, "Lou, you should have something." He says, "But I thought I could." "No, you could order something." He goes, "All right, I'll have a steak." And he slaps him and he pulls him away. He goes, "I told you I don't have any money." He goes, "But you asked me." He goes, "I have to ask you. I have to ask you. Fine." I said that again. He says, "Okay, so what do you want?" He says, "I'll have a turkey sandwich and a cup of coffee." He says, "What about you?" "I don't want anything." He says, "Lou, you should order something." "No, I don't want anything." "Lou, it's not right. You're coming to a luncheonette. It's not nice. This woman's working for a living. You got to order something, "All right, I'll have a steak." Hits him again. I told you that. Anyway, they do this over and over again. And he keeps falling for the same trick because that's every one of us. We know this world is make-believe. We know Torah is MS. We know that there's a God and spirituality. And we know how we should be living our lives. But we allow ourselves to be sucked into the illusion of this world. The word shofar is lishaper, to beautify. The name Shifra in the Torah, right? Because she would lishaper the babies. She'd make them beautiful. She'd clean them up. The shofar makes it yofi. Why? Because the sun can't be seen when it's cloudy. Because the day is me'uchar. It's cloudy. It's hidden. And the shofar blows away the clouds, and then the sun shines, and you can see it clearly. Now you can see the yofi. Now Hashem can be hoifia metzion. Now you see exactly what reality is all about. And how many people know what the truth is, but like Lou Costello, they fall for the line every single time. Have something big, have something small. It's not right. You have something. And you fall for it. even though you know it's wrong. So why don't you stand up for what's real? Why don't you stand up for the truth? Because you bought into the illusion. And some people want the illusion, like the guy in the Matrix who says, I want to go back into the machine. I don't want reality. Reality is too hard for me. I'd rather be in a world of make-believe. Some people literally drive themselves crazy so they can live in a world of fantasy. I mean, Facebook renamed itself as Meta, and they have this virtual reality world where you can create an alternate version of yourself and interact with other people who have alternate versions of themselves. And this one woman sued this man because he attacked her in the metaverse. In the make-believe world, she was attacked, her make-believe character, by this guy's make-believe character. Ad kadei kach, the illusion. But that's every one of us. Like the famous story of the Gerrit Tzedek of Vilna, who, when he was being burnt at the stake for the crime of converting to Judaism, so the executioner said, I'm burning you in this world, but I guess you'll burn me in the next world. And he says, I'm a nobleman. And I didn't have any noble children to play with. So I played with the peasants. When I was a little boy, the peasants broke my toys. And I said to my father, put those children to death. My father thought about it, and he said, when you're 18, you become of age, and you could put them to death yourself. He says, when I became 18, did you think I wanted to put these children to death because they broke my toys? He says, what are you doing? You're burning my body? My body's not real. This whole world is an illusion. My neshama, which is real, my soul, is going to continue on and go to Olam Haba. Not only that, but because you're killing me for being a Jew, I'm going to go to the highest levels of Shemayim. And when I get up there, you think I'm going to be troubled by petty emotions like revenge and anger and, jealousy? Forget about it. I don't care. You're not doing anything to me. You can't hurt me. It's all make-believe. When we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, we start blowing it in Elul. So it takes a little prep time to sense what is real. And when we go into Rosh Hashanah, it's a Yom Hadin. You have to judge yourself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at you and says, who are you? Who do you want to be? What do you want? What are your dreams? What are your aspirations? Who do you want to be at the end of your life? Like we said last week. And we fall for the illusions and for all the make-believe and things that are nothing. Nothing. Masil Sharm in Perek Aleph, he says, no intelligent person could possibly believe that we were created for the pleasures of this world. Because for that, you don't need a soul. You're basically just a cow. Right? There's no difference between you, and an animal. If you're just here for physical pleasures, except he eats grass and you eat steak. You know what I mean? So otherwise, it's the same thing. So you're a lion. You know what I mean? Especially if you like your meat rare. So you're a lion. And you engage in all the same activities. And he says, forget about that. How many people in the whole world are really happy? You talk to most people and they tell you life is filled with suffering and worries and problems and this and that. So we're not having fun. I remember seeing a bumper sticker. I don't remember if it was in the 80s or 90s. A bumper sticker said, are we having fun yet? And that's why there was a guy in Harvard, a professor in Harvard, gave a course in happiness. It was sold out every year. When anybody comes out with a book on happiness, it sells out right away. Everybody's miserable. It says the Masil Sharm. And if you do find somebody who is happy, 1 in 100, who can say they're really happy, so by the time they get to 100, it's like they're already dead. what can you really enjoy? You reach a certain age where the physical pleasures, those of you who are in my age group, you know that as the years go by, there are more and more things that you cannot eat without suffering. When you're a teenager, you can eat anything you want in any amounts, and that's it. No problem. But in my age group, you spend your whole time thinking, if I eat this, I'm going to be sick for 2 days. If I eat that, I'm going to be sick for 3 days. What are the pleasures? He says, and if after all of this you die, so what was the point of dying if we're just here to enjoy this world? So this world is just a place for us to develop a relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and everything else is illusion. And when we blow shofar, all the illusion is blown away. All of the clouds disappear. Hevel, I call Hevel. Hevel is a mist. It's like it creates these illusions, and they're all blown away by the shofar. And so we're going from Elul into Rosh Hashanah, and the Tekiyah shofar is there to wake us up because we're asleep. That's what the Rambam says. Aru, Aru, wake up. The shofar wakes us up and tells us, start living the life that you want instead of the life that happens. Start choosing to live reality instead of illusion. And the famous marshal, my fact checkers out there will tell me where the marshal's from. But the famous marshal, that his boat stops at this tropical island, which is a paradise. Says, listen, we're just going to fill up the boat with supplies. We're going to get water, we're going to get food, etc. And once we're all done, we're going to take off. So when it's time to come when we're about to take off, we're going to blow the ship's horn. And we're going to set out about an hour later. Fine. Then, just before we pull out, we're going to blow the ship's horn again. So if you really, really run, you'll make it. And then, as we're just about to leave the cove, the harbor, over here, the lagoon, we'll give one more blast. So if you wait until the last minute, you can jump in and swim to the boat. You'll still probably make it. The water's not that deep. And after that, you're going to be stuck here. Okay. Everybody was on the island. I couldn't believe it. It was a paradise. It was the most beautiful place. It was wonderful. And they hear the first horn. And so those people who are, more organized, all got themselves up and made their way to the boat, sat down nicely, etc. And then the second horn blew, and other people were like, oh my gosh, he's taking off. And they all ran and they got there just breathless, but at least they got there in time, And then when they were out in the lagoon, they blew it a third time. And the few people who were left, they were like, oh my gosh. And they jumped into the lagoon, they swam, and, they were wet. They pulled themselves up, and okay. And other people ignored all three. And then winter came, and there was no fruit on the trees. The monsoon started, and they all perished on the island. So goes the mashal. We start blowing the shofar, Rosh Chodesh Elul, and we say, if you wake up in Elul and you get yourself ready, you'll come into the Yom Adin like a mensch. If you wait till Rosh Hashanah and you listen to the shofar, okay, you got a serious beit tshuva. You're going to have to hustle, but you can still do great things. And if you wait to the shofar at the end of Ne'ilah, as the gates are closing, you still have one last chance to take a jump, to be able to jump through the gates and make it. But you're going to have to work much harder. My friends, it's Elul. We're blowing the first siren on the boat. It's time for us to get ourselves together and shake off the shadows and illusions. It's time for us to take a serious look at our lives and say, who do I want to be at the end of my life? Like we said last time. And I look back at my life that I have led. What is that life going to be? and let's get ourselves together now and organize ourselves. Everyone should have a ksiva v'chasima tova. And that's it for this episode. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sponsor an episode. You can sponsor a Parsha in 5. You can sponsor a question and answer. You can submit a question. I didn't get any questions this week, but you see that I do make a lion's effort sometimes to make up a bunch of them at the same time. Afterwards, have special question in the episodes. You can sign up for one of the online shiurim. And again, if you would like to submit a special Rosh Hashanah greeting to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show community, something along the lines of, "Hi, my name is Dovid Orlofsky, and I want to wish everybody a ksiva v'chasima tova." Or you could say, "Shalom, Shmi David, אני רוצה להגיד לכל המאזינים של Rabbi Orlofsky show, Shana Tova." Or you could say, "My name is Dovid Tzvi Hersh, and I want to wish everybody a gesunte Yontif." Yeah? Or if you are, that pretend for them, saying, "Hi, my name is David Howard Orlofsky, and I want to wish everybody a happy and a healthy new year." Whatever it is, we want to hear from you. So if you're interested, please send that little recording into RabbiOrlofskyShow@gmail.com. And you can see it on the screen in case you forgot what I just said. And that's it. So maybe you'll find yourself, we'll make you a star. And that's it. Until next time, I am Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.